The front door clicked shut behind me, not slammed, closed, slowly. I stood in the entryway holding a pie I'd baked that morning. The house was too quiet. No football on the TV, no kitchen noise, no voices. My husband's phone was on the dining table, screen lit, missed calls, from me. I heard footsteps behind me, his stepfather. He didn't smile. "Ethan's busy," he said calmly. "Busy?" It was Thanksgiving. I turned toward the hallway. "That's not your concern tonight," he added. And that's when the air shifted, not louder, heavier. I set the pie down on the sideboard like I was in someone else's house. The smell of cinnamon felt out of place in that silence. "Where is he?" I asked again, keeping my voice level. His stepfather, Mark, adjusted the cuff of his shirt. He was dressed too neatly for a family holiday. Also, no apron, no loosened tie, not even a drink in his hand. "He's handling something," Mark said. "He'll be back." Back from where? Back from what? I stepped toward the dining table and picked up Ethan's phone. The screen was unlocked. That alone was strange. Ethan never left it like that. No new messages, no explanation. Just my missed calls stacked like a small accusation. Mark's hand reached out, not quite touching me, but close enough to steer the space. "Put that down," he said softly. I looked at him. "It's my husband's phone." His mouth tightened. "It's not your business right now." Not my business. The phrase landed wrong, like a door closing in a hallway. Have you ever felt rules appear in a room that never had them before? I tried to keep it simple. "Mark, I drove 3 hours. I'm not here to argue. I just want to see Ethan." Mark nodded toward the living room. "Sit. You look tired." I didn't sit, because sitting felt like agreement. I moved toward the kitchen instead, needing noise, needing something normal. The counters were wiped spotless. The stove was cold. No turkey smell, no dishes, no mess, no Thanksgiving, just a staged house pretending to be one. "Where's your wife?" I asked. Mark didn't answer immediately. That delay told me more than a sentence could. "She's resting," he said finally. Resting. At 4 in the afternoon, in a house with no food cooking. I heard a faint sound then, not a voice, more like movement upstairs, a slow creak on the floorboards. I looked toward the staircase. Mark stepped slightly into my line of sight. "Don't go up there," he said. I froze. That wasn't a request. It wasn't even a warning. It was a boundary he expected me to obey. My chest tightened in a quiet way, the way it does when you realize you're the only one following the rules of normal conversation. "Why not?" I asked. Mark's eyes didn't flicker. "Because you'll upset him." "Upset who? Ethan? Or Mark?" I glanced back at the table and noticed something else. Ethan's wallet was there too, beside the phone, like he'd been told to empty his pockets and stay put. My mind tried to make it make sense. Maybe Ethan had stepped out for something urgent. Maybe his mom was sick. Maybe there was a surprise and I was ruining it. But if it was innocent, why did it feel like the house had been holding its breath before I arrived? Mark's voice softened, like he was trying to sound kind. "You've always been intense," he said. "Ethan needs peace." Intense. That word people use when they want you to stop asking questions. I walked toward the front door without rushing. Mark didn't move, but when I reached for the handle, I felt it. The lock. Turned. Not stuck. Locked. I stared at it for a second too long, then I looked back at Mark. He didn't look guilty. He looked prepared. And that's when I realized I wasn't here for Thanksgiving dinner. I was here for something else entirely. I didn't try the lock again. There are moments when forcing something only confirms what the other person wants. Instead, I turned slowly and leaned against the door, like I had simply changed my mind. "Why is it locked?" I asked. Mark didn't flinch. "Neighborhood's not what it used to be." That house sat on a private road with security cameras at both ends. But I had been visiting for 6 years. The door had never been locked during the day. Have you ever heard an excuse that sounded rehearsed? I moved away from the door and walked back toward the dining table. Ethan's phone was still there, face up, silent. I picked it up again. This time, Mark didn't reach for it. He just watched. I opened the recent calls list. 3 calls from me, 2 from someone saved as Office Daniel. None answered. No outgoing calls after 10:14 a.m. Ethan had texted me at 9:52 that morning. Can't wait, drive safe. After that, nothing. I looked at Mark. When did you last see him? I asked. Before lunch. Before lunch. So he'd been here when I arrived. The air shifted again, heavier now that the timeline had shape. I'm going upstairs, I said. Mark stepped directly into my path. You don't need to. I met his eyes. Move. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. Just firm. He didn't move immediately. Instead, he lowered his voice. You're not thinking clearly. Ethan's making an important decision. It's better if you're not involved. Important decision. My stomach tightened. What decision? He hesitated. And in that hesitation, something clicked. Ethan had been struggling at work for months. Disagreements with a business partner, tension over funding. Mark had been unusually invested in the conversations, offering advice, suggesting alternatives, encouraging Ethan to simplify. Simplify what? Simplify who? Have you ever realized you were the complication in someone else's plan? I stepped sideways and climbed 2 stairs before Mark's hand landed on the railing beside mine. Not grabbing me, or just blocking further movement. You don't want to do this, he said quietly. His tone wasn't threatening, it was confident, as if the outcome had already been agreed upon. From upstairs, I heard it again. A door shutting softly. My heartbeat grew steady instead of fast. Panic would help no one. Clarity might. If this is about Ethan's business, I said carefully, you don't get to isolate me from it. Mark's jaw tightened. This isn't about you, he replied. It always is, when someone says that. I looked at the staircase, then at him. You locked the door, I said. You told me not to go upstairs. You're telling me I'm not part of a decision that affects my husband. He didn't argue the facts. He reframed them. You've been influencing him, Mark said. Influencing. I almost smiled. Because influence was simply another word for partnership. Ethan and I built decisions together. We reviewed contracts together. We questioned risks together. Mark had never liked that. He preferred conversations without witnesses, without resistance. I took 1 step back down from the stairs, not retreating, repositioning. You think if I don't hear it, it won't exist? I asked calmly. Mark didn't answer. He didn't need to. The house was silent again, but it wasn't empty. Someone was upstairs, and they were being shielded from me. That realization settled into something solid. This wasn't confusion, it was coordination. And if it was coordinated, then I needed to stop reacting and start observing. I stepped away from the staircase, not because I was giving in, because I needed information more than access. Mark relaxed slightly when I moved toward the kitchen again. He mistook repositioning for retreat. I poured myself a glass of water. The faucet hummed louder than usual in the quiet house. From where I stood, I could see the reflection of the staircase in the microwave door. A shadow passed briefly across the landing. Not Mark. Someone else. Ethan. He was there. Not gone, not missing, just separated. Have you ever realized that absence can be staged? I placed the glass down slowly and turned toward Mark. If he's making a decision, I said evenly, then he can tell me himself. He will, Mark replied. When? Soon. Soon is a word people use when they want time to move without explanation. I walked toward the living room and noticed something else. Ethan's laptop bag sat by the couch. Open. Inside were printed documents. I didn't need to read them fully to recognize the format. Share transfer agreements, buyout clauses, equity redistribution. My stomach tightened, but not from fear. From recognition. Ethan had been considering selling part of his company. He and I had discussed waiting, reviewing terms carefully. Mark had pushed for speed. Opportunities don't wait, he'd said. Opportunities for whom? I picked up one page and skimmed. The valuation seemed lower than recent projections. Have you ever watched someone rush a deal when patience would cost them leverage? Put that down, Mark said again, sharper this time. I did. Not because he told me to, because I had seen enough. You brought investors here today? I asked. He didn't deny it. They're family friends, he said. Family friends who specialize in asset acquisition. I felt something settle inside me, not panic, alignment. Mark had isolated Ethan, removed me from the conversation, created urgency, locked doors, framed it as peace. You think I pressure him? I said softly. Mark's silence confirmed it. You think I complicate his choices. He second-guesses everything with you, Mark replied. Because we analyze, because we question, because partnership isn't obedience. From upstairs, I heard a faint cough, Ethan's cough. My chest tightened for a second, then steadied. I walked toward the staircase again. Mark stepped forward. But this time, I didn't stop at his body blocking the way. I spoke past him. Ethan, I called calmly. No yelling, just clear. Silence. Then another cough. Closer. Mark's jaw clenched. See, you're making this harder, he said. For who? I asked. For Ethan, or for you? Have you ever noticed how control requires quiet compliance? I placed my hand on the banister. If he wants me gone, I said, loud enough to carry upstairs, he can say that himself. The house held its breath. Seconds passed, then footsteps, slow, measured, descending. Mark's posture shifted subtly, less confident now, because whatever was decided upstairs hadn't been sealed with my absence. It was about to be tested in my presence. And when Ethan appeared at the top of the stairs, eyes tired but alert, I saw something else. Not agreement, conflict. This wasn't a united front. It was pressure, and pressure reveals fractures. Ethan paused halfway down the staircase. He didn't look at me first. He looked at Mark. That small detail told me everything. Not about loyalty, about influence. The house smelled faintly of turkey and wood polish. Normal holiday things, familiar things, but the air felt different now. Thicker, like a room waiting for a verdict. Why are you here? Ethan asked quietly. Not angry, not relieved, careful. I came home, I said. Simple, true. Mark stepped slightly behind him, not beside him, positioning, always positioning. She doesn't need to be involved in this, Mark said, his tone calm but edged. Involved in what? The documents on the couch? The investors upstairs? The decision that had apparently already been shaped? I looked at Ethan, not at Mark. Is there something you want to tell me? I asked. Not accusing, not dramatic, just direct. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. That nervous habit he'd had since we were dating. There's an opportunity, he said. A buyout. I saw the papers. His eyes flicked toward the couch, then to Mark, then back to me. They think it's the right time, he said. They, not I. Have you ever noticed how responsibility gets distributed when confidence is missing? And you? I asked. He hesitated. That pause mattered more than any answer. I don't know, he admitted. Mark exhaled sharply. You've been stuck for months, he said. This gives you freedom. Freedom from what? Growth requires movement, but forced movement isn't freedom. I stepped closer, still keeping my voice steady. The valuation is lower than your last projection, I said. You told me that yourself. Mark's expression tightened. That was before market shifts, he replied quickly. Ethan looked between us. Conflict visible now. This wasn't about money alone. It was about control. Who he listened to, who he trusted, who defined urgency. Have you ever been painted as the obstacle simply because you asked questions? I don't want to fight, I said quietly, and I meant it. I didn't want drama. I didn't want theatrics. I just want you to decide without pressure. Mark's jaw flexed. There is no pressure. The locked doors said otherwise. The sudden investors said otherwise. The isolation said otherwise. Ethan descended the final steps, standing between us now, physically, emotionally. I asked her to give me space, he said finally. I felt that sentence land, not like a blow, like confirmation. Space, defined by someone else, shaped by someone else. I would have, I said. If you had told me. Silence again. Not loud, not explosive, just heavy. Have you ever realized the real fracture isn't betrayal, but avoidance? I stepped back toward the front door, not because I was dismissed, because clarity had arrived. I'll leave, I said calmly. Mark seemed almost relieved. Ethan looked conflicted. You don't have to, he said softly. But he didn't move toward me, didn't bridge the distance. That mattered. I think I do, I replied. I picked up my bag. The phone still sat on the table, untouched, charged, present, unlike the communication that should have happened days ago. As I opened the door, cool air brushed my face, grounding, steady. Have you ever noticed how stepping away feels less like defeat and more like oxygen? I didn't slam the door, didn't argue, didn't explain, because explanations require listeners. And in that house, I was no longer being heard. But something else was beginning to surface. Not fear, not anger, awareness. And awareness changes everything. I didn't drive away immediately. I sat in the car with the engine off, watching the house through the windshield. Curtains moved upstairs, lights shifted, silhouettes crossing rooms. Inside, decisions were being made without me. Or so they believed. My phone buzzed 20 minutes later. Not Ethan. A number I didn't recognize. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. Is this Mrs. Carter? A man asked. Yes. This is Daniel Hargrove. I'm one of the investors reviewing your husband's equity position. Investors calling me directly? Interesting. I was under the impression you weren't available to join the meeting, he continued carefully. I almost smiled. I wasn't informed there was a meeting, I replied. Silence on his end, brief, measured. That's unexpected, he said. Unexpected for him, not for me. May I ask, he continued, if you've reviewed the draft terms? I saw enough. Another pause. The kind professionals use when recalculating risk. Have you ever noticed how quickly confidence shifts when information spreads evenly? There are concerns about valuation, I said calmly, and timing. That aligns with some of our internal hesitations, Daniel admitted. Internal hesitations. So this wasn't the clean, unanimous decision Mark presented upstairs. Has your husband expressed reservations? He asked carefully. Yes, I said. He has. Not a lie. Not entirely. The hesitation on the staircase had been real. The silence after. The uncertainty in his eyes. Real. Daniel cleared his throat. In that case, we may postpone finalization. Postpone, delay, pressure losing speed. I thanked him and ended the call. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time, Ethan. I let it ring once, then answered. Why are investors calling you? He asked. His voice was tight, controlled. Because my name is on half the original filings, I replied. Silence. You didn't tell them to back out, did you? He asked. I stared at the house again. No, I said truthfully. I told them to review carefully. Another silence. Have you ever watched a strategy unravel simply because light was introduced? Mark stepped onto the porch. Even from the car, I could see tension in his posture. He was on the phone too, walking back and forth, rapid gestures. Ethan's voice softened slightly. They're reconsidering, he said. They should, I replied. That's months of negotiation. Or years of regret, I said gently. I wasn't attacking. I wasn't accusing. I was stating a fact. Inside the house, the meeting shifted. Doors opened, footsteps echoed, voices lowered, not explosive, just strained. Mark stepped back inside abruptly. The porch light flicked off. Have you ever realized that urgency often masks fear? I didn't know they'd involve you, Ethan said quietly. That's the problem, I replied. He didn't respond immediately, because he knew. In that moment, something fundamental changed. Not between Mark and me, between Ethan and the narrative he'd been fed. You can come back inside, he said after a long pause. But the tone was different now, not distant, not dismissive, uncertain. I think I'll wait, I said calmly, because stepping back had revealed more than staying would have. Inside, conversations were shifting. Not because I fought, because I didn't. And that difference was about to expose something none of us had expected. I didn't go back inside that night. Instead, I drove to the small hotel near the highway, the kind with patterned carpets and humming ice machines. I booked one night. No drama, no explanation. Have you ever noticed how quiet feels different when it's chosen? I sat on the edge of the bed and finally let my shoulders drop. Not in defeat, in clarity. I wasn't being pushed out, I was stepping back. Ethan texted around midnight. Mark overstepped. I didn't know everything. Can we talk tomorrow? I didn't respond right away. Not to punish him, not to create tension, just to feel what it was like not to rush back into fixing something that wasn't mine alone. By morning, 2 more messages came. One from Ethan, one from Daniel, the investor. The investor's message was short. We've paused the decision pending full partner review. Paused, not collapsed, not exploded, just slowed, and slowing down changes power. I realized something in that hotel room. I had spent years trying to prove my value inside rooms that benefited from my silence. That night, I stopped proving. I didn't need to argue, didn't need to cry, didn't need to threaten. Sometimes, now the most powerful move is stepping aside and letting everyone see what shifts when you're no longer holding the structure together. By noon, Ethan called again. His voice sounded different. Not defensive, not pressured, just uncertain. And uncertainty was the first honest thing I'd heard all week. 3 days later, I met Ethan at a quiet coffee shop near the office. Neutral ground. No polished conference table, no glass walls, just soft music and the smell of roasted beans. He looked tired. Not angry, not defensive, just tired. I didn't see it happening, he said. That was the first time he admitted it. Not that Mark crossed a line, not that the investor pressured him, but that he didn't see me shrinking in rooms I helped build. What happens when someone finally notices the silence they've been standing inside? He told me the investor had backed away from Mark's proposal, not because of me directly, because during review they found inconsistencies, missed disclosures, overconfidence without numbers to support it. Mark exposed himself. No dramatic fallout, no shouting matches, just paperwork catching up. Ethan asked if I wanted to come back full-time. I took a slow sip of coffee before answering. I'll consult, I said, on my terms. Not as a favor, not as a test, as a boundary. He nodded. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was trying to hold something together alone. The house didn't change overnight. Neither did the business. But the energy did. Respect isn't loud. It's steady. If you've ever felt yourself disappearing inside a room you helped build, you understand. Sometimes stepping back isn't loss. It's clarity. What would you have done?